Hi Gigi, come share an apple with me. I picked it fresh from Granny Smith's sinister tree. Don't mind my stories, you'll soon see. They're as dark and disturbing as they can be. Murmurs of secrets, bloody sodden crimes, Granny's bone-clicking tales will twist your mind. You'll be hanging on my words from the edge of your seats. Now how'd you like to go dig up some bodies with me? So go grab a shovel and gather around, 'cause 8 feet under is where they'll be found. This podcast contains detailed discussions of real-life crimes, which may include descriptions of violence, sensitive subject matter, and other potentially distressing content. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The material is intended for mature audiences only and may not be suitable for children or those who may find such topics triggering. Hey, and welcome back to 8 Feet Under with Granny Smith. When I say today has today'd the hell out of me, but I made it through. I'm grateful. But before I start, I do need to give two special shout outs. One to my older brother Freddie and one to my bestie Brittany. Thank you for all your support with this, not just the podcast, but with pretty much everything in life. I know we talk almost every single day, sometimes for hours on end, and I just wanted to let you know how much I really appreciate it. I don't think you understand how much it means to me. So I appreciate you guys. If I ever make it big, it'll be the first I splurge on the dollar menu with. Enough with this happy stuff. I can't remember when or how I came across this story, but it has stuck with me. And I know it was years ago, but I don't know how I came across it. Anyways, it stuck with me, and so I figured I'd tell it to you. Today I'm going to tell you the story of David Parker Ray, also creepily known as the Toy Box Killer. I have also seen some refer to him as the Toolbox Killer, but either way, you won't find Hot Wheels and Slinkies in this man's toy box. So I do want to give a trigger warning. This episode will have some pretty graphic details that some may find triggering or hard to hear. So if you need to skip or pause or whatever, I understand. If you do want to listen and you have children in the room, give them the boot. Just kidding. Put some headphones on because it's definitely not for kids. So the sources I use for today are a document from the Department of Psychology of Radford University. The information was researched and summarized by Denise Schrock, Justin Reese, and Ashley Poindexter. It was also an April 26, 2023 Regis University Highlander article by Austin Price, and an October 12, 2011 ABC News article by Jessica Harper. The rest will be in the show notes. All right, let's see. So David Parker Ray was an American kidnapper, rapist, sadistic torturer, and suspected serial killer responsible for kidnapping, raping, and torturing many women over many decades, as early as the 50s and 60s, in what he disturbingly refrained to as his quote-unquote toy box in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. So just to make this already horror movie-like situation even worse, David wasn't working alone during his long reign of terror. His accomplices included his little boo thing and girlfriend Cindy Hendy, his close pal Dennis Yancey, and hold your britches bitches, his own freaking daughter Glenda Jean Ray, sometimes known as Jessie. It kills me when I hear that women do these things, especially against other women. I mean, it's bad when no matter who does it, but I don't know. It's like, how do you even ask someone to participate in this stuff like this? Like, you just sitting around chilling on the couch with your husband, and he's like, yeah, you want to go catch a movie and some dinner, and then like kidnap and torture some people later on? Like, what do you say to that? That's just so weird to me. Anywho, his true victim count is unknown. However, police suspect and his accomplices accuse him of murdering up to 60 of his victims. So riddle me this though. No bodies or definite evidence was ever found at all. How does that happen? How is that possible? Anyways, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this evil man. So just to give you some background on his early childhood, David was born on November 6, 1939 in Belen, New Mexico. His mother was Nettie Opal Parker and his father was Cecil Leland Ray, who was a mechanic, with a very different definition of what fatherhood should be. David also had a younger sister named Peggy Pearl Ray, and they both lived on a ranch with their maternal grandparents, Dolly and Russell Parker, who were known for their belief in very strong, very firm discipline. So from time to time, Ray's dad would pop in to visit him, bearing gifts for good old Ray. What kind of gifts? So glad you asked. Magazines containing sadomasochistic pornography, because I guess Pogs and Jacks were just too basic and boring back then. So he sounds like Father of the Year. So in high school, Ray became a target because he was shy around girls, And then the bullying resulted in him dabbling in drugs and alcohol. His already dark fantasies of raping and torturing women grew increasingly violent. So essentially, by the age 14, David was giving less of a young puppy love type vibe and more of an abduct and torture vibe. And it's definitely giving psychopath. So he and his sister had drifted apart after she found his disturbing drawings and collections of porn. She was just like, yeah, Ray, I gotta create a little distance here, bro. So although the police couldn't verify this, Ray told his first wife that he killed his first victim in 1957. And I'm sure that had to be an interesting conversation, because what was her response? What do you say to that? Hey, babe, I murdered somebody in 1957, tortured and raped and murdered them. And her response is what? He's so dreamy. I couldn't even imagine. How would you respond to that? So Ray joined the Army after high school, where he worked as a general mechanic and received an honorable discharge. After his discharge, he became a mechanic for the New Mexico Parks Department. So see, serial killers live these seemingly normal lives, working a good old 9 to 5. Whole time they have a whole secret, nasty, disturbing life. So Cindy was 37 when she met our boy Ray, and she was on the run for Grand Theft Auto charges in Washington. They connected over their shared interest in violent sexual fantasies, so she sounds lovely too. It's like a match made in hell. Ray had been divorced a total of 4 times and has 2 children. So let's talk about this toy box. It was a 22-foot long soundproof trailer that contained a multitude of items and devices that he used for sexual torture. So I guess all that time working as a mechanic came in handy when it was time to build his little mobile toy box of terrors. And I'll upload pictures of the inside of the quote-unquote toy box. So reportedly, Ray kidnapped roughly 4 to 5 women a year and held them for about 2 to 3 months. During their time in captivity, these poor women were subjected to a nightmare of torture and sexual abuse, which included the use of his so-called toy collection. And this toy collection consisted of surgical instruments, whips, slave collars, chains, electric shock machines, saws, blades, sex toys, syringes, a fur-lined coffin, and a freaking makeshift pillory. So if you don't know what a pillory is, it's a historical device made of a wooden frame with holes to lock someone's head and hands. If you look at a picture, you'll know exactly what it is, because when hearing that word, I didn't know what it was, and then I saw, I was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. So essentially, it's a medieval form of public humiliation and abuse. So Ray, this guy, he even had diagrams to show ways of inflicting pain. And he wanted his victims to see everything, so he mounted a mirror on the ceiling. It's estimated that he spent about $100,000 designing this toy box. He invited friends and his little boo thing, Cindy, and his daughter to participate in these horrific crimes. And to make this even more sick and twisted, super trigger warning for my animal lovers here, he even used his male dog to assault his victims while they were locked in the pillory. I can't and I won't imagine how that's even possible. So just to pump a little more fear through his victims and break them down psychologically, when they regained consciousness, he would play an audio recording of himself detailing the very specific ways of how they were going to be tortured. When he was done with them, he would drug them in hopes of erasing their memory and then leave them on the side of the road. So let's talk about some of his suspected victims. On September 25th, 1988, a 15-year-old man named Billy Ray Bowers disappeared from Phoenix, Arizona. And then a little over a year later, on September 28th, 1989, a fisherman found the body of an unidentified male that was wrapped in blue tarp at McCree Cove at Elephant Butte Lake in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. The man had been shot in the back of the head, and he had no identification on him. But in March of 1999, the police used dental records to identify this man as Billy Ray Bowers. Now, Billy Ray was not Billy Ray. I was going to say Billy Ray Cyrus. I'm leaving all that in. I don't care. You'll see I make many mistakes. I'm human. It is what it is. So Bowers was the co-owner of a used car business on North Van Buren Street in Phoenix called Canal Motors. And I'll give you 2 guesses as to who worked at Canal Motors as a mechanic. Our boy Ray. And apparently he was a really good mechanic, but he and Bowers bumped heads. So none other than Ray's little boo thing, Cindy, tells the police that Ray admitted to her that he killed Bowers and disposed of his body in Elephant Butte Lake. Then we have Jill Susan Troia, Troia, By the way, I never, ever, ever mean any disrespect if I ever mispronounce a name, especially a victim's name. I mean no harm. I try to pronounce it the best I can. It just doesn't always work out that way. So no disrespect intended there. Jill disappeared during the evening of September 30th, 1995, and she was only 22 years old. She was last seen at a restaurant called the Frontier Restaurant in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jill had been at a bar with some friends, but then she left to the restaurant with her friend. Drum roll. Somebody tell me how to add noises in, like sound effects and stuff, so I could add like a drum roll right there. Drum roll, please. Glenda freaking Jean Ray, also called Jessie Ray, David Parker Ray's daughter. So there were witnesses that stated Jill and Glenda had an argument, but Glenda says she left Jill at the restaurant and went with David to Elephant Butte Reservoir, and that she just never saw Jill again. So that was the last time Jill was ever seen. But our boy Ray liked to keep track of details of his sexual torture and burial of his victims. One of those describes an Asian woman fitting Jill's description. And we have Sylvia Marie Parker, who disappeared on July 5th, 1997. She was also only 22 at the time of her disappearance. Sylvia knew Ray through his daughter, who also supplied her with cocaine and meth. Jill was homeless and living on Elephant Butte Lake with her 2 children in a tent that David gave her. And at the time of her disappearance, she was dating David's old buddy and pal and torture teammate, Dennis Yancey. So Dennis claims that Ray forced him to strangle Sylvia, and then with the help of David and Glenda Ray, they disposed of the body. So Dennis later led the officials to where he claimed Sylvia's body was, but when they got there was nothing there. So both Dennis and the authorities believe that David later returned to the disposal site and removed the body because he figured Dennis would snitch. So jumping ahead to June 30th of 1999, 61-year-old fisherman Ralph Tudor from El Paso was fishing at Elephant Butte Lake when something got caught on his fishing line. So it turns out this was a gunny sack that weighed about 80 pounds, and initially Ralph thought the gunny sack was filled with animal flesh. 'Twas not animal flesh, 'twas human flesh. But since there were no organs or bones found in the gunny sack, this meant the body was mutilated and dismembered before being disposed of. There were also fragments from a female human leg that were found in 2011. So now here's an interesting quote, or alleged quote, from Ray, who states, quote, "The thing to do is cut them down the belly, scoop out their guts, fill the chest cavity with cement weights, and then using a balling wire to wrap them up," end quote. Not gonna lie, had no idea what a balling wire or a gunny sack was, so I looked it up. And I don't know if I'm saying the right balling wire or baling wire. Anyways, it's wire it's like hay wire. And the gunny sack is a large bag or sack made from burlap that was historically used to transport agricultural goods like potatoes and grains. So there was no date on when this happened, but apparently David's daughter and accomplice, Glenda Ray, did try to warn the FBI about her father's disturbing habits. Agent Beldone from the FBI states, quote, "She alleged that David Parker Ray was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico," end quote. But the FBI couldn't arrest David due to the vagueness of the allegations. And here we go again. I understand that there has to be a certain amount of significant information, evidence, whatever, but I feel like if I were an agent or a cop and I heard that, I would kind of have to go rogue. My curiosity would get to me. I would have to just take a little drive and run out of gas or break down right near his property and have to take a little snoop around, because I don't know, I just feel like I would have to check that out. So finally, on March 22nd, 1999, the escape of one of his victims, Cynthia Vigil, is what ultimately led to David's arrest and putting an end to his disturbing secret life. Another woman by the name of Angelica Montano, who was also a victim of David's, that came forward telling her horrific story regarding her similar encounter with David and his accomplices. After David and Cindy released her, she was found along the side of a highway by an off-duty cop. She told this cop what happened, but he thought she was lying and let her out at a freaking bus stop. I want to know when all this came out if that guy still had his job. So 100 agents were sent to David's property, but unfortunately investigators couldn't find any identifiable remains. How the hell could there not be even one speck of evidence in this trailer that he has been using for decades? He must have had one hell of a cleanup crew. So, and side note, I forgot to mention that David claims that the sexual torture was consensual, When I read that, I rolled my eyes so hard you could hear it. And my thing is, if something is consensual, why do you need to clean it up that much? Like, why do you have to do such a great job? Like, did you bleach bomb it? Did you power wash it? What happened? So if you think about that, if you're doing your adult stuff, when you're done, how much of that do you clean up? You probably wash your sheets, take a shower. Do you remove every single trace of that person being in your house? Every hair, every fingerprint, wipe down everything they touched, every glass they ate off of or drank off of? No. You don't need to do that if it's consensual. Why would you have to? So make that make sense. In an attempt to identify more of Ray's victims, the FBI released photos to the public of hundreds of items they collected over the course of the investigation with the hopes that someone may recognize them. If you want to see those photos or those items, I did include the link to the FBI's website so you can look at them there. Special Agent Patricia Rust from the FBI was responsible for sketching the inside of David's quote-unquote toy box, which I'm sure had to be a gut-wrenching sight. So after several days in the terrifying trailer meticulously sketching its interior, Agent Rust returned home where she tragically took her own life. Now there is conflicting information about this. The article from Regis University states she committed suicide after what she saw in the trailer. She just couldn't handle it. While another article from Picture Poison states the FBI ruled her suicide was not a result of her time in the toy box. Either way, it's still really sad, still really tragic. So after reviewing a videotape dated 1996, Kelly Garrett was identified as another victim through a tattoo on her ankle. She thankfully was found alive in Colorado. So after 2 terrifying days in captivity, David actually drove her home and then told her husband that he found her on the freaking beach. Kelly didn't really know how to tell the police what happened, how to explain the whole ordeal, so she just didn't contact them. And then sadly, her husband divorced her because he didn't believe her when she said she couldn't remember where she was for that 2 days that she was missing. What an ass. And I even wrote that on my paper. What an ass. Poor girl. So the transcriptions of Ray's tapes show all the meticulous planning this took. So the whole consensual thing, you just randomly pick up people and happen to have this trailer ready for all this. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me still. But anyways, I'll post a link to the website that has the transcripts of the tapes. I've been reading them and they are kind of sickening. So read at your own risk, and super trigger warning here for the next quote that I got from the transcripts. So one of the transcripts reads, quote, "I've been raping bitches ever since I was old enough to jerk off and tie little girls' hands behind their back," end quote. And another states, quote, "I get off on mind games. After we get completely through with you, you're going to be drugged up real heavy with the combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. They're both hypnotic drugs that will make you extremely susceptible to hypnosis, auto-hypnosis, and hypnotic suggestion. You're going to be kept drugged for a couple days while I play with your mind. By the time I get through brainwashing you, you're not going to remember a fucking thing about this little adventure," end quote. Did I say that right? Pentothal. 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 Anyway, there were also handwritten posters in David's trailers with little mottos, or I guess what he would consider daily affirmations. One that says, quote, "Expect the unexpected." Another that says, quote, "A woman will say or do anything to get loose," end quote. And then another lovely one that states, quote, "Never trust a chained captive," end quote. And finally, quote, Don't let her get to you. If she's worth taking, she's worth keeping," end quote. So during the trial, the judge ruled David be tried separately for Angelica Montano, Cynthia Vigil, and Kelly Garrett. That was a major blow to the prosecution, because had he been tried for all 3 together, then each of his victim stories would have supported one another. Also, a large portion of evidence found in the trailer, including those videotapes, or audio tapes, were inadmissible in the Angelica and Kelly cases. So in the trial for Kelly Garrett, the jurors did not believe her story, which resulted in a mistrial. Now there wasn't a retrial, and then finally, this evil sack of waste was convicted on all 12 counts. But this poor woman, first, her husband didn't believe her and he divorced her, and then the jurors didn't believe her. She had to go through a retrial. It's so sad. So in the trial for Cynthia, Ray agreed to a plea bargain about a week into the proceedings and received a sentence of 224 years in prison in 2001. And David's good old pal, 27-year-old Dennis Yancey, pled guilty to the murder in 1997. He received a 30-year sentence for the murder, as well as 2 counts of conspiracy to commit a crime, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. He served 11 years in prison and was paroled in 2011. But a whopping 3 months after he was released, Dennis was rearrested for a parole violation and sent back to prison until 2021. Now remember, Dennis claims that David forced him to strangle Sylvia. However, David and Glenda Ray were never charged due to the lack of forensic evidence linking them to this murder. So, finally, Ray's boo thing and our Woman of the Year, Cindy Hendy, was sentenced to 36 years in prison in 2000 for her participation in the crimes. Now, she was supposed to be released on parole in 2017, but wound up serving 2 of those years of parole in prison. Then she was released on July 15th, 2019. I don't understand that, though. I didn't know that was a thing, that you could serve parole time while you're in prison. Like, was that really a thing? Does anybody know? Somebody tell me that. In the 90s, in New Mexico, could you serve parole time while in prison? So after David's arrest, he did agree to show the police where the remains of the victims were. So they brought him to Lee County Correctional Facility on May 28, 2002, where he was supposed to be interrogated. Wanna guess what happened there? This asshat died of a heart attack before the interrogation even began. And although no bodies were ever found, Ray's accomplice Cindy Hendy claims that the murdered victims were either buried, thrown in Elephant Butte Lake, or in ravines after being dismembered. So, unfortunately, most of David's victims were dismissed or not believed because they were sex workers or people that authorities considered to not be credible. So this led Christine Barber and Cynthia Vigil to found the Street Safe New Mexico, which is a nonprofit that works with sex workers and other vulnerable people in the community. And to me, this is the true definition of turning your pain into power. So good for them. And that, my friends, is the story of that waffle stomping son of a bitch, David Parker Ray, aka the Toy Box Killer. And if you don't know what waffle stomping is, I'm not going to say it right now. Look it up. But damn, that was one hell of a terrifying story. Like, imagining someone having gotten away with that for so many years. But if you're able to stick with me through it, I thank you kindly. There's also an interview with the survivor, Cynthia, on YouTube. I'll include that link. There's a video on Prime called The Toy Box Killer. I'll include that. There's also an episode of I Survived a Serial Killer. I believe it's season 1, episode 13 on Amazon. I haven't watched that yet. And you can follow me on IG and Twitter at the number 8FTUNDER_GS85. Or you can email me, if people even do that anymore, at the number 8FTUNDER.GrannySmith@gmail.com. I have a list of about 70 topics to cover. But who knows? I mean, crime and murder and mysteries and all types of stuff's been happening since the beginning of time. So I'm sure there's so many more stories out there that I don't know about. So if you have any, please feel free to let me know. Give me those suggestions. But until next crime, stay safe, stay hydrated, don't be an ass. And remember, an apple a day keeps the murderers away. Bye. Psych, I'm back really quick. I need to correct myself. I stated that Billy Ray Bowers was 15. He was not 15. He was 53. My bad. If I catch something I do wrong, I will correct it. Okay, bye.